When creating our methods, it is possible to have optional parameters in our parameters list. And so let's talk about these here because you could see these on the exam. So in this video, let's talk about how normally a method's parameters are required by default. If we just create a method and list the parameters out there and we're looking for those arguments, every one of those has to be supplied or we get an error. Now, we can also designate some of our parameters as optional. And when we do that, the optional parameters do not have to be included in the method call. However, an optional parameter does have to include a default value as part of its definition. And if we don't mention that particular parameter in the call, then the default value goes in. Pretty straightforward. Here's the syntax for it. Notice I've got a method for add employee or it's named add employee. I'm expecting a string for the first name. And then notice I'm taking an integer of age, and by setting it equal to 0, this is instructing C# compiler that this is an optional parameter, and then weight is also set equal to 0. That's the defaults, and that makes it optional. The best way to understand this is just to see it in some code. So let's jump out into Visual Studio, create a project named optional parameters, and you'll get a copy of this in work files if you want to open it up and look at it. And so we'll just call it optional parameters. Now, what we're going to do here is just our standard little single form, single button in the middle of that form, and then we'll kick off the functionality from there. So let's give it just a moment to settle in, and we'll go out into the toolbox, double click on a button, let that get out of the way. Come right here. Now we'll double click our button, write our code, and play with it. Okay, so let's first of all go down here and create our method. We'll create a method, public void add employee. And we'll first of all put the right side in. We'll look for a string as a parameter, and we'll call it employee name. And then notice we could do int age and int weight. Now, if we do that, then these are going to be required, right? And then if I put my message box show in here, I'm going to put a little message out here. The following has been added. And we would have written code to add this into a database or whatever we're going to do with it. Just keep in mind in all my examples, I'm not putting the completing code for what we would do with it. Notice IntelliSense sees employee name there as a possibility. And then I'm just going to concatenate some spaces. And we're going to list the values of all of these. And we will be able to see what was put in, okay? So notice when we run this, we're going to take whatever was passed in for name, age, and weight, and we're just going to put those in a message box and show the current values or whatever we passed in or whatever happened with them. Now, notice these are all required. If I try to run that and leave one out, I'm going to get an error message, okay? So let's call add employee, and let's pass them all in, okay? Mark, and the age is 39, right? And the weight is about 190, right? If we're going to lead you astray, let's do it big time. So I'll click start and we'll watch this run. And right now we're not using any optional parameters. Everybody is required and everybody should be happy. So notice Mark, 39 and 190 was added. Okay, pretty straightforward. What if I try to leave one of these out? All right, I'm going to leave the 190 out on here. And instantly I get a squiggle and it's saying, there's no overload here for any different arguments. If you remember the method overload, you know what that means. So what can we do with this? Well, all we have to do is come down here and make these optional. So if I don't pass something in, then it's not going to be happy, okay? And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a named parameter. I'm going to pass age, just like this. All right, and so when I execute this, you're going to notice it's going to pop up, and it should set weight equal to 0 because I didn't pass anything in. So weight is now optional. Okay, so play with this example. Just go out there and work with it, but these are now optional and you don't have to pass them. So that's what an optional parameter looks like. Very simple concept. You will see these out there. You'll probably see them on the exam. You just want to remember, when you see definitions like this in your method definition, you're setting default values on these parameters, then you're looking at optional parameters.